Hello and welcome to Lost Love Chronicles.
Dear listeners, before we get started, drop a quick hi in the comments and let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, if you have any suggestions for us to make the channel better, please let us know. Now let's start with the story. My name is Dominic Hawthorne. I'm 31 years old, a practicing lawyer in Delaware. People see the suits, the courtroom poise, the steady voice, and they think I've always had it together. But before I became the man standing before you today, I was just a boy small, scared, and living in darkness. My earliest memories aren't of toys or laughter. They're of screams and bruises, memories that cling to my bones like smoke. My story begins in a small town, nothing special. Red dirt roads wound past sagging porches and old wood houses. Ours looked perfect from the outside. A white picket fence, flowers in the window boxes. Neighbors waved. People smiled. We looked like a portrait of a happy family. But inside, it was a nightmare. The first thing I remember most clearly is the stench. Cheap liquor. It clung to my father's breath every time he stumbled through the front door. He was tall, always casting a long shadow across the hallway. His hands sinewy, weathered, seemed to carry a kind of fury in them. An unpredictable, simmering rage that never really had a reason. My mother was soft, quiet. A gentle woman with eyes that always looked tired, like she was searching for something that had long slipped away. She tried God. She tried to keep the peace. But peace was not something that lasted in our house. Not when my father drank. And he always drank. On nights when the bottle was empty and his fury was full, the house turned into a battlefield. Shattering plates. My mother's pleading voice. His growl. It all blended into a sickening kind of music that played too often in our small kitchen. I was 6 when it happened for the first time, at least, the first time I remember clearly. It was winter. Snow had laid a soft white sheet over the dirt roads. I remember being cold, even inside the house. I'd just come back from school, cheeks red from the wind, and I sat at the dinner table like any other night. I reached for the milk, my little hands clumsy in the cold, and it slipped. The glass hit the table's edge, tipped, and spilled in a wide, white arc across the tablecloth. I looked up. My heart dropped. "You think this is your house to do whatever you want," my father barked. His eyes were bloodshot, wild. "I'm sorry," I stammered, backing away in my seat. He didn't wait. His hand came down fast, a blur of motion and heat. It hit my shoulder hard. I remember the crack, the jolt of pain, and I fell to the floor, breath knocked from my lungs. "James, stop," my mother screamed, scrambling toward me. She knelt beside me, her arms wrapping around my body, shielding me. "Please, he's just a child." But he wasn't done. He grabbed her by the hair and yanked her back, dragging her from me. She cried out, but he didn't care. His fists followed. The sounds. I'll never forget them. Blunt, brutal, flesh on flesh. Her cries. His breathing ragged, loud, animal-like. All I could do was curl up on the floor, hands over my ears, eyes shut tight, trying to block it all out. Eventually, like always, it ended. He staggered off to the bedroom, muttering, slamming the door behind him. Silence fell again, heavy, choking. My mother moved slowly, gathering the shattered glass from the floor like it was just another chore. Her hands trembled. She barely looked at me until she was done. Then she came to my room and sat beside me on the bed. She reached out and brushed her fingers over the fresh bruise on my shoulder. "Dominic, you have to be strong, okay?" she whispered. Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better." I didn't understand why she was apologizing. She was the only thing good in that house. The only thing warm. I wrapped my arms around her and buried my face in her shoulder. She trembled as I held her, and in that moment, I made a silent vow. One day, I would save her from him. I would take her far away from the monster that called himself my father. But things only got worse. The years dragged on. My father lost his job at the factory, and the bottle became his constant companion. Morning, afternoon, night. He drank like he was trying to disappear inside it. And every time he did, he found a reason to take his anger out on my mother and me. Once, he threw me against the wall just for making noise while watching TV. I remember it like it just happened. I was maybe 7. I had come home from school and turned on the television to catch the last few minutes of a cartoon I liked. I laughed just once, maybe too loud. And in the next instant, I heard his heavy boots stomp across the floor. He stood in the doorway, red-faced and swaying. "You think this is a playground?" he growled. "I'm sorry, Before I could finish, he grabbed me by the arm, yanked me up, and slammed me against the wall. My head hit the plaster so hard I saw stars. I slid down to the floor, my body crumpling like paper. I didn't cry. I learned early not to give him that. Another time, he beat my mother so badly she couldn't stand. Her offense? She asked where he'd been all night. I was sitting at the kitchen table when it started. She spoke softly, almost like she was afraid of her own voice. James, it's nearly morning. Where were you? He didn't answer at first, just took off his jacket, threw it on the floor. Then, without warning, he turned around and struck her across the face. You don't get to ask me questions, he spat. She fell. I remember her hand hitting the chair on the way down, the sound of bone on wood. I wanted to move. I wanted to scream. But I froze, helpless again. After that night, the bruises on her body multiplied. She wore long-sleeved shirts every day, even in the thick, choking heat of summer. She'd smile at the neighbors, always pretending everything was fine. But strangely, amidst that nightmare, there were still moments, brief and fragile, where peace found us. Moments with my mother. After the beatings, when the house was quiet and the air still heavy with tension, she'd take my hand and lead me to the backyard. There, beneath the wide branches of an old oak tree, we'd sit in silence. Sometimes she told me fairy tales, her voice soft and melodic like it used to be before the shouting started. Other times, we'd lie back on the grass and look up at the stars, letting the stillness wrap around us like a blanket. Dominic, she whispered one night, pointing at the sky, do you see? Even when darkness covers everything, the stars are always there. I turned to look at her. Her face was swollen, one eye dark and puffy, but her gaze was gentle. You have to be like that, she said. Always shining, no matter how hard life gets. Those words etched themselves into my bones. I didn't fully understand them then, but I clung to them. They became a flame, small, flickering, but enough to keep me standing through the worst days. But I wasn't always strong. Some nights, when the screaming started his voice, her cries, I couldn't bear to listen. I'd crawl into the closet, wrap my arms around a pillow, and bury my face in it. Please, I'd whisper to nobody, make it stop. I hated myself. I hated being so small, so useless, hiding while my mother suffered. I hated my father for what he did to us. And sometimes, in the darkest corners of my heart, I hated the world for letting it happen, for forgetting we existed. Then, when I was 8, Leah was born. She was everything. A little miracle with big round eyes and the kind of smile that could melt pain. For the first time in a long time, I saw something like joy on my mother's face. Leah brought light with her, and somehow, that light spread to all of us except, it seemed, me. Because my father changed. With Leah, he was different. He'd hold her in his arms and smile an actual smile. The kind I didn't know he was capable of. You're my treasure, he'd whisper, rocking her gently. His voice would soften, almost like a stranger had taken his place. I couldn't understand it. How could a man so violent, so full of poison, be tender, be kind? But I didn't question it, not aloud. I was grateful. Grateful that Leah wouldn't have to feel the things I felt. Grateful she wouldn't have to hide in closets or flinch at raised voices. She was the only bright spot in our broken family. Still, as months passed, something inside me ached. My father's love for Leah made me feel more invisible, more unwanted. He barely looked at me anymore unless I did something wrong. One day, I dropped one of Leah's toys. Just a plastic rattle. It rolled under the couch, out of reach. She started to cry, and I turned to get it. He was there. Instantly. You clumsy little shit, he roared. Before I could speak, he slapped me. Hard. My ear exploded with a sharp, ringing pain, like a bell had gone off in my skull. How dare you make your sister cry? He shouted, his voice like thunder. Leah wailed not because of the toy, but because she saw me being hit. Her little face twisted in terror, and she ran to me, arms open. Dodo, she cried, trying to hug me. But before she could reach me, my father snatched her up. No, baby, it's okay. Daddy's here, he said, holding her close, rocking her gently. Shoo, it's all right. His voice became soft, loving, even warm, as if I were some kind of monster she needed protection from. I sat there stunned, cheeks stinging, ears ringing, and heart cracked wide open. My mother stood in the corner of the room, frozen. Her arms hung at her sides, fists clenched tight. Her eyes were red not from tears, but from exhaustion, from watching her child be struck again while being powerless to stop it. That night, she curled us both in her arms, me on one side, Leah on the other. Her embrace was warm, trembling. I love you both, she whispered into the dark. No matter what happens, you'll always have me. But even in that moment, I could feel it. She was breaking. She was running out of strength, and the cracks in her spirit were widening. The years crawled by under a blanket of fear and silence. My childhood became something I tried not to think about. Days lived on tiptoe, avoiding creaking floorboards, avoiding eye contact, avoiding my father altogether. I learned that silence was safety. I learned how to tuck my bruises beneath layers of clothing, how to smile at school just enough to keep people from asking questions. I didn't want pity. I didn't want them to know that when I went home, it wasn't to warmth and love, but to shouting, to fists, to cold dinners and colder glares. But every time I saw new bruises on my mother's arms, her back, her face, my chest ached like something inside me was being crushed. I began to dream of escape, not just for me, but for her, for Leah. I was maybe 10 when I made myself a promise. I would grow up, get strong, earn enough money to take them both far from that house, far from the man who made our lives hell. When I was 13, things got worse. Much worse. My father drank more. His eyes turned glassier, his temper shorter. The beatings less predictable, more brutal. One night, I heard a crash from the kitchen. I ran in and found my mother on the floor, bleeding from her temple. He'd struck her so hard, she was unconscious. I ran to her. "Mom, Mom," I screamed, cradling her head in my hands. "Stop. You'll kill her," I shouted up at him, my voice cracking with panic. He just looked down at me, eyes empty, lips curled in disgust. Then, with one swift motion, he kicked me. Hard. The pain exploded in my ribs as I flew back and hit the wall. I lay there, gasping for breath, watching my mother still, silent, blood pooling beneath her hair. I thought she was gone. But after some time, minutes, hours, I couldn't tell she stirred. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first. When she saw me, she tried to smile through her swelling face. "Dominic," she whispered, "you have to survive. For me. For Leah." I nodded, unable to speak. The weight of her words settled deep in my chest. I knew she was hanging on by threads, and I knew that if I didn't do something, one day I might lose her forever. So I began to plan. I studied. Hard. I poured myself into my books with the desperation of someone trying to dig their way out of a pit. School became my escape. Even though it was hard to sit through class with bruised ribs and a heavy heart, I forced myself to focus. Knowledge was my way out. Still, I knew time was against us. Every day my father seemed closer to unraveling completely. There was a madness in him, now a look in his eyes that made my stomach knot every time he came home. And then, things shifted again. I was 16, an age where I should have been worrying about exams, or maybe who I was going to ask to the school dance. But I didn't have the luxury of normal teenage worries. Every morning, I woke up wondering, is today the day he goes too far? Our house felt like a ticking time bomb. The tension, the screaming, the sound of glass breaking, it was constant. But something new was creeping into the fights. The arguments between my mother and father grew more vicious, more pointed, and more, they revolved around another woman. I rarely saw my mother stand up to my father. Most of the time, she would just absorb his cruelty like she'd built armor out of silence. But there was one night, just one that still rings in my memory like a siren. I was in my room, trying to concentrate on homework while muffled voices escalated from the living room. Then I heard her. "If you bring her here, I'll kill myself right in front of you." Her voice raw, defiant, desperate, cut through the house like lightning. There was a pause, then his response came like a bomb. "You dare threaten me?" he roared, his words slurred and soaked in liquor. "You're nothing, Eliza." I heard something crash, maybe a lamp. "You think you can hold me back? A useless woman like you?" I closed my textbook and just sat there, heart pounding. His words weren't just loud, they were poisonous. They stabbed through the walls and settled deep inside me. I couldn't stop hearing them. After that night, I started noticing changes in my mother. Subtle, but chilling. She moved slower, spoke less. Her shoulders were always hunched, as if something invisible was pressing her down. One afternoon, I found her in the kitchen. She sat at the table, unmoving, a cold cup of tea cradled in her hands. She stared at the wall like it held answers to a question she couldn't ask. "Mom," I said quietly, "are you okay?" She looked at me and smiled. But it was hollow, like she'd forgotten how. "I'm fine, Dominic," she said, turning her head away. "Just look after Leah, okay?" That broke me more than any scream ever could. She was trying to protect me, but I could see she was unraveling. And I couldn't just stand there and watch her slip away. So I began writing everything down. Every time my father came home drunk. Every argument. Every new bruise on her arms, her neck, her face. I documented it all in an old spiral-bound notebook I kept hidden beneath a loose floorboard in my room. I didn't know exactly what I'd do with it. I just knew that one day, it might matter. It might save her. But I was 16, just a kid, and still powerless against the brute force that ruled our house, and the twisted fate that never seemed to give us a break. Then came the day I'll never forget. It was mid-October. The sky was gray, and a soft rain had started to fall light enough that you could still hear the leaves rustling. I'd stayed late at the library, finishing an essay on constitutional law. I remember feeling proud of it. When I got home, something felt wrong. No arguing. No TV blaring. No Leah's voice echoing through the hall. No scent of my mother cooking. Just silence. Heavy, unnatural. I stepped into the living room. My father was slouched on the sofa, legs sprawled out, staring blankly at the wall. An empty bottle rolled on the floor near his boot. "Dad," I asked cautiously. He didn't look at me right away. Then, slowly, he turned his head. His eyes were foggy, unfocused. "Your mom," he mumbled. "She fell down the stairs. She's in the hospital." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. "What?" I said, stepping forward. "Fell down the stairs." I could barely form words. My voice trembled. "How did she fall? What did you do to her?" His expression changed. Something dark flashed across his face. In a flash, he lunged at me and grabbed my collar, yanking me down toward him. "You dare talk to me like that?" he snarled. "I didn't do anything. She fell, got it." Then he shoved me hard. I stumbled, hit the floor, palms scraping against the carpet. He turned his back, muttering something about getting more liquor, already reaching for his coat. I didn't care. I didn't say a word. I just ran. I didn't stop to grab a jacket. Didn't even close the door behind me. I tore down the street, the rain soaking into my shirt as I sprinted toward the hospital a few blocks away. When I arrived at the hospital, my chest heaving, soaked in cold rain and fear, a nurse quickly came to meet me. She didn't say much, just gave me a quiet, grim look and led me through the halls to the emergency room. That's when I saw Leah. She was sitting alone in the hallway, her small body curled into a chair, clutching the ragged little doll our mother had sewn for her last Christmas. Her face was streaked with tears, her eyes swollen and red. "Dominic," she sobbed the moment she saw me. She ran into my arms, trembling. "Mom, she won't wake up," she cried into my chest. I held her tightly, wrapping my arms around her, burying my face into her wet hair. I wanted to be strong, to comfort her. But inside, something had snapped. A storm was building, fury, grief, guilt all tangled into one roaring, helpless agony. A nurse touched my shoulder. "She's in room 12, she said softly. I followed her. Every step down that hallway felt heavier than the last. When I walked into my mother's room, everything stopped. She was lying there on the hospital bed, still and pale. Her eyes were closed, her face calm in a way that didn't belong to the woman I knew. Bruises lined her arms and neck, dark and sharp under the harsh fluorescent light. Each one looked like it was screaming the truth no one else would say aloud. The doctor was already there, a middle-aged man with kind but exhausted eyes. His voice was low and careful, like he was used to delivering bad news, but never got better at it. "She suffered a severe head injury," he said, "from a fall down the stairs. We did everything we could." He paused. His eyes met mine. "But she didn't make it. I'm so sorry. I don't remember moving. I don't remember sitting down. I just remember standing there beside her, reaching for her hand. It was cold, lifeless. That warmth that used to pull me out of the darkest corners was gone. Just gone." I wanted to scream, to rip the bed apart, to run out and confront my father, to look him in the eyes and make him say it. Say what you did. But I couldn't move. I couldn't even cry. Leah clung to me again in the hallway, sobbing into my side. "It'll be okay, Leah," I whispered. "I'll take care of you." But the words felt empty even as I said them. I didn't believe them. Not in that moment. Not with my mother's hand still frozen in my memory. The days that followed were a haze of gray skies and hollow condolences. A prolonged nightmare I couldn't wake from. My father arranged the funeral, standing like a stranger in an old, wrinkled suit that smelled like liquor. He didn't cry, didn't say a word to Leah or me. Neighbors came. They brought casseroles, soft words, and sidelong glances. They whispered about the tragic accident, about how terrible it was. But I saw the doubt behind their eyes. They knew. Maybe not the whole truth, but enough. No one said anything. And I wanted to scream at them all. She didn't just fall. He pushed her, one way or another. Whether with his fists or his words or the years of fear, he buried her under. He killed her. But what could I do? I had nothing. Just my notebook filled with scribbles, dates, fragmented thoughts, notes about bruises and slurred threats. It wasn't enough. Not in a world that didn't believe kids. Not in a world where men like my father always seemed to walk away. The night after the funeral, I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, unable to sleep. Everything inside me ached. My chest felt hollow, like someone had carved my heart out with a spoon. And then I remembered her voice. Just a few days before she died, she had pulled me into a hug. Her arms were thin, but her grip was strong. Her breath warm against my ear. "Dominic, you're my hope. No matter what happens, you have to keep going. Stay strong." I had nodded. I remembered that. But now, that promise felt like a curse. Because she was gone, and I hadn't saved her. What hurt even more were the questions that refused to leave me alone. Doubts that crawled under my skin and stayed there. I kept remembering the arguments, those tense, bitter fights in the kitchen, in the hallway, behind closed doors. Fights about her. About my father's affair with a woman named Celia. I remember the night I heard my mother confront him. Her voice trembled, but there was a fire behind it, like she'd finally had enough. James, you think I don't know you're seeing her again? She asked, her voice low but clear. How long has it been going on? I stood in the hallway, just out of sight, heart pounding. He scoffed. You're paranoid, he said, but there was something in his voice tight, defensive. You've lost it, Eliza. You think I'm stupid? She snapped back. I see the way you come home smelling like her perfume. I see the receipts, the way you're always looking at your phone. How long, James? He didn't answer, but I saw his face when I peeked around the corner. For the first time in years, he looked shaken, scared even. And that's what haunted me. Did she know too much? Did he push her to silence her forever? Those questions chewed at my mind every night. The image of her lying in that hospital bed wouldn't leave me. The bruise at her temple. The words I never got to say. I started investigating. It was reckless, I knew that, but I didn't care. One night, when he passed out drunk on the couch, I crept into his room. My hands were shaking. I didn't even know what I was looking for, only that I had to find something. I searched his drawers and stumbled upon an old phone. It was dusty, probably forgotten, but when I powered it on, it still worked. There were messages, lots of them. From her. Celia. At first, they were flirtatious. Miss you already, once said. Last night was amazing. But then they turned sharper, more frantic. Eliza knows, one of her texts read. She'll ruin everything. Then, I'll handle it. My stomach dropped. I'll handle it. Those 3 words felt like acid on my skin. I read them over and over, hands trembling. Was that it? Was that what he meant when he said she fell? I wanted to believe it was just a coincidence, that I was reading too far into it. But I couldn't ignore the timing, the tone, the fear in his eyes that night. Still, I knew the truth wouldn't be enough. Not for the world. Not for the law. Not when I was just a 16-year-old kid. So I went to the only adult I trusted. Miss Harris, my English teacher. I asked if I could stay after class and told her everything about the bruises, the beatings, the night my mother died, the texts I found. I watched her face shift from sympathy to deep concern. She sighed, folding her hands together. Dominic, she said gently, I believe you. I do. But you need more solid evidence. These messages, they could be a misunderstanding. And you're not safe confronting him. You're too young to take this on alone. I wanted to yell. I wanted to tell her it wasn't just texts, it was everything. But I nodded. Because deep down, I knew she was right. The truth was like a knife twisting inside me. I had nothing that could hold him accountable. And the woman who could confirm it all was buried 6 feet under. 2 weeks after the funeral, he brought her home. Celia. I came home from school, and there she was standing in the living room, laughing like this was all some happy reunion. Her arm was draped over my father's like they were hosting a damn dinner party. She walked through the house like it was hers. Like my mother had never existed. I stood there, my fists clenched so tightly my nails cut into my palms. Who is she? I shouted. I couldn't stop it. My father turned to me, calm as ice. His voice was low, almost bored. This is Celia, he said. She's going to live here now. If you don't like it, you can get out. It hit me harder than any slap. I wanted to leap at him, scream, throw something, anything. I wanted to hurt him the way he had hurt us, my mother, Leah, me. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. Because out of the corner of my eye, I saw Leah frozen by the doorway. Her little hands gripped the hem of her shirt, her eyes wide and wet with fear. I knew I had to think. I had to be smart. I had to wait. But I also knew time was against me. That house had become something twisted. Familiar, but poisoned. Everything that once felt like home now felt like a ghost. Celia's cheap perfume mixed with the ever-present stench of my father's liquor. It was suffocating. She was everywhere. In the kitchen where my mother once hummed while stirring soup. On the couch where my mother used to hold Leah and me and tell us fairy tales. Celia walked like she owned the place. Spoke like it too. When my father wasn't around, she'd order Leah around the house telling her to clean up toys, fold laundry, wipe the table. And if Leah hesitated for even a second, Celia's voice would harden, sharp and cold, scolding her like she was a maid and not a grieving little girl. I saw the fear in Leah's eyes every time Celia raised her voice, and it tore something open inside me. She'd flinch even when Celia took a step too fast. That kind of fear doesn't come from discipline. It comes from trauma. And I knew that if I didn't do something soon, she'd carry that same pain I carried, the kind that festers and grows in silence. But what could I do? I was 16. No money, no power, no legal right to take Leah anywhere, and nowhere to turn. So I endured. For her. Every night, I lay beside her on the thin mattress we shared in our cramped room. I'd stroke her hair and whisper stories ones our mother used to tell us. I'd promise her things I had no idea how to give. One night, she turned to me in the dark. Her voice was trembling. Dominic, you won't leave me, right? I pulled her close, holding her tightly as her small body shook in my arms. Never, Leah. I promise. But even as the words left my mouth, I felt their weight sink into my bones like stone. That promise didn't feel like comfort. It felt like a debt I didn't know how to pay. And then everything came crashing down. It was a Saturday night, about a month after my mother's funeral. I'd been working a part-time job at the nearby grocery store, doing everything from stocking shelves to bagging groceries, just to save whatever scraps I could. Every dollar I stashed away brought me 1 inch closer to something better. Some way out. When I got home, it was already dark. The house was dim, just the flickering light from the TV casting long shadows on the walls. Then I heard yelling. Celia. I dropped my backpack and rushed into the living room. You're as clumsy as your mother, she shrieked. Leah stood by the coffee table, a broken glass on the floor and water soaking into the rug. Her tiny hands were clenched at her sides, tears running silently down her cheeks. She didn't say a word, she just stood there, shaking. That was it. I felt the anger rise in my chest, hot and uncontrollable. My blood roared in my ears as I stepped forward. Leave my sister alone, I shouted. Celia spun around, eyes narrowing. Oh, the brave little boy, huh? She sneered. Who do you think you are, talking to me like that? She stepped toward me, arm lifting fast. Her hand was coming down, ready to slap me. But I grabbed her wrist midair. Don't touch me or my sister, I said, my voice shaking with fury. My heart was pounding so loud I could barely hear myself speak. But I didn't let go. Not this time. At that exact moment, the front door banged open. My father stumbled in, a half-empty bottle of liquor swinging from his hand. His eyes were red and unfocused. He looked at us like he didn't recognize either of us. What the hell is going on? He barked. Celia instantly slipped into her act. She ran to him, wrapping her arms around his like some damsel in distress. Your son dared to disrespect me, she said, her voice honey-sweet but soaked in venom. He thinks he's the boss of this house. My father's face darkened. He turned to me, with fury burning in his eyes. You dared touch Celia? He thundered, moving toward me like a charging bull. I stood my ground. My legs trembled, but I didn't move. I couldn't. I didn't touch her, I said firmly. I was protecting Leah. She has no right to yell at her. That was the final straw. He lunged, grabbing me by the collar and dragging me across the living room. His grip was iron. His breath reeked of whiskey and rage. You want to play the hero? You want to defy me? He snarled. He yanked open the front door, rain already beginning to fall in thin, cold sheets. Fine. And with that, he shoved me. I stumbled down the steps, landing hard on my side. This isn't your home anymore, he bellowed from the doorway. Get out. Then the door slammed shut behind me. The sound of the lock turning echoed louder than any scream. I sat there, stunned, the cold steps soaking through my jeans. My heart racing, my body sore. Rain drizzled down, steady and quiet, as if the world didn't care. I had nothing. No money, no food, no water, just my backpack and my grocery store uniform. I stared at the closed door, the sound of the lock still echoing in my ears. From inside, I heard Leah crying her small, broken sobs slicing through the night like knives. My heart shattered. I wanted to scream, to pound on the door with my fists until they bled, to break it down and rip her away from that nightmare. But I couldn't. He was bigger than me, stronger, and if I tried, he might hurt her just to punish me. So I stood there, shaking, soaked in rain, fists clenched and teeth gritted. I wiped my tears and whispered to myself, I'll come back for you, Leah. I swear. Then I turned and walked into the cold. I wandered for hours, aimless and numb. The streets were empty, the sky an endless sheet of gray. I passed lit windows and warm homes, watching families eat dinner, laugh at the TV. I was invisible to all of them. A ghost. That night was freezing. I found a secluded corner in a park and crawled behind a row of shrubs near a playground. There was a bench, a patch of dirt, and just enough tree cover to shield me from the worst of the rain. I sat there, huddled, hugging my backpack to my chest. The darkness felt endless. I thought about my mother, her voice, her hands, the way she used to wrap me in a blanket and hold me under the oak tree when I was little. She'd stroke my hair and whisper, You have to be strong, Dominic. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. Mom, I whispered into the night, choking back tears, what do I do now? But there was no answer. Only wind. By morning, I was shivering and soaked to the bone, but I had one name in my mind, Travis. He was my best friend from school, the only person who might understand. I walked for nearly an hour, every step a battle against the cold and exhaustion, until I reached his house. I stood at his front door, hesitant, heart pounding. What if they turned me away? What if they were scared of getting involved? But I had no other choice. I knocked. When Travis opened the door and saw me drenched, my eyes red, lips trembling, he didn't ask anything. He just stepped aside and pulled me into the warmth of his house. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. His mother, Linda, came from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her eyes widened when she saw me. "Oh my God, Dominic." She led me to the kitchen table, sat me down, and placed a warm plate of eggs and toast in front of me. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until that moment. After I ate, she sat across from me and took my hand. "What happened, sweetheart?" I told her everything. About my mom, my father, Celia, the night he kicked me out. I tried to hold it together, but halfway through, my voice cracked and I broke. I sobbed into Linda's arms, clutching her like a child, like I hadn't let go of anything in years. And she just held me, whispering, "You're safe now. You're safe." She let me stay a few nights, gave me clean clothes, let me shower, but I knew I couldn't stay forever. I didn't want to bring trouble to their door. I was terrified my father would come storming in, drunk and angry. And then I remembered someone. My Aunt Sophie, my mother's younger sister. They'd been close once before my father came into the picture. Sophie hated him. She never said it outright, but I always saw it in her eyes. She stopped visiting after the wedding, but I remembered she'd come to the funeral. She cried more than anyone, and she hugged me like she wanted to take all the pain out of my chest. I found her number in the old contacts of my phone and dialed. "Hello," she answered after a few rings, her voice uncertain. "Aunt Sophie, it's Dominic," I said. "Dominic?" she gasped. "Oh my God. Sweetheart, are you okay? Where are you?" I broke down again. I told her everything I hadn't told her at the funeral. My voice cracked again and again, but I pushed through. "Aunt Sophie, I don't know where to go. Leah's still there. With Dad. And Celia. I need help. I don't know what to do anymore." She didn't even pause. "Come here right now," she said, her voice trembling with urgency. "You'll stay with us. We'll figure out how to save Leah. I promise." Her words wrapped around me like a blanket in a blizzard. For the first time in what felt like years, I felt hope. Linda drove me to the bus station that morning. The sky was still gray, and the chill hadn't left my bones, but her presence made it feel just a little less lonely. She pressed a few folded bills into my palm and handed me a paper bag filled with food sandwiches, some fruit, a bottle of water. "Dominic," she said, her voice catching as she looked at me. "You're a strong boy. You hear me." Her eyes were misty. "Take care of yourself. And don't give up on your sister." I nodded, unable to speak. I hugged her hard. She felt like a mother in that moment, a mother I wasn't ready to lose again. "Thank you, Linda," I whispered. She kissed my forehead. "Go. Be brave." I boarded the bus and found a seat near the back. As the engine rumbled and the town slowly began to shrink outside the window, I pressed my forehead to the cold glass. I watched the streets I had known my whole life fade into the distance, and it felt like I was leaving a part of myself behind. But I had to go. For Leah, for my mother, and for me. The bus ride wasn't long, maybe a few hours, but it felt endless. I sat there, clutching my backpack to my chest like it was the only anchor holding me together. My thoughts spun. Could I go back and save Leah? Was she safe? Would he hurt her like he hurt Mom? Was Celia yelling at her now? Would Leah think I'd abandoned her? The questions dug at me like claws, but I forced myself to breathe. "Stay calm, Dominic. Sophie will help. We'll find a way. There's still time." When the bus finally pulled into the station, I spotted Sophie right away. She was standing just outside the terminal entrance, wrapped in a navy coat, her face pale and tired, but when she saw me, her whole body shifted. Her eyes welled up, and she gave me a smile that was warm and trembling at once. "Dominic," she said, her voice cracking as she rushed toward me. She pulled me into a hug, tight and real. I felt the warmth of her arms, and something inside me started to thaw. "You've been through so much," she said, pulling back just enough to look at me. "But you're safe now. From now on, I'll take care of you." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. My throat was tight. I wasn't used to this kind of gentleness anymore. She took me home. Her apartment was small but cozy, walls painted in soft pastels, photos of her and my mom as girls still framed on the shelf. It felt like stepping into a parallel world where love still existed. Her husband, Raymond, was tall and broad-shouldered, with a shaved head and kind eyes. He reminded me of someone who might have been a high school coach, but there was no hardness in him. He held out his hand and gave my shoulder a firm pat. "Welcome to the family, kid," he said. "We've got your back." I gave a small smile, grateful, though my chest still felt hollow. Those first few days at Sophie's, I was a ghost. I ate when told. I slept when I could. Spoke when spoken to. But inside, I wasn't really there. Because Leah wasn't. She was still in that house with him. And her. Every night I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what she was going through. I called Travis and asked him to keep an eye on her. "She's still going to school," he told me. "But she's different, man. Quieter. She looks sad." I thanked him and hung up, my fingers trembling. I knew I couldn't wait forever. But I needed time. I needed to build something solid. Sophie and Raymond helped me more than I could have ever expected. Sophie enrolled me in school, bought me new clothes and books. She treated me like her own son. No questions asked. No judgment. Just love. Raymond, in his quiet way, took me outside some evenings to the small park behind their building and taught me basic self-defense moves. A man needs to know how to protect the ones he loves, he said one night, handing me a water bottle as we took a break. I nodded. Thank you, I said. But strength alone won't be enough. I need more. He looked at me and nodded slowly. Then you keep building. Keep learning. So I did. I studied harder than I ever had. I kept my head down. I worked part-time after school again, saving money like every penny was a piece of armor. But every night, she came to me in my dreams. My mother, standing beneath the oak tree from our old backyard, her dress flowing in the breeze, her eyes full of sorrow and love. Dominic, she would whisper, you have to save Leah. And every time I woke, drenched in sweat, I'd whisper back into the dark, I will. I promise. I wouldn't fail. I would go back, and I would get Leah out of that hell. Living with Aunt Sophie and Uncle Raymond was like stepping into another world. Their apartment was small, but it breathed warmth, cream-colored walls, soft rugs, framed photos of family lining the shelves, and always the comforting scent of cookies Sophie seemed to bake without reason. It was safety, something I hadn't known in so long that it felt almost foreign. But even here, even in this newfound calm, I couldn't rest. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Leah. Her wide, fearful eyes. Her little hands clenched at her sides as Celia screamed at her. Her small shoulders flinching at every sharp word. Those images haunted me. They didn't fade with time. They grew sharper. I knew I couldn't wait any longer. But I also knew I couldn't just storm back into that house like some teenage hero. My father was dangerous. A man whose rage had no bottom. And Celia, she might not have thrown fists, but she knew how to wound in ways that lingered. I had to be smart. Precise. Prepared. So one night after dinner, I sat Aunt Sophie down and told her everything. Everything. About the beatings. The constant fear. My mother's death. Leah's pain. The screaming. The bruises. The way Celia treated her when no one was looking. Sophie sat across from me, not interrupting once. Her hands were clenched in her lap. When I finished, her eyes were red with tears. She tried to blink away. Dominic, I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice cracking. I didn't know things were this bad. I should have taken you kids away sooner. I should have done more. I reached out and took her hand. It's not your fault, I said quietly. But now I need your help. I have to get Leah out of there. She nodded, her jaw set with resolve. We'll do it. We'll get her out. But we need to be careful. Your father, he's not someone to take lightly. Then she turned to Uncle Raymond, who had been sitting silently on the sofa during the entire conversation. He stood slowly, walked over, and placed a firm hand on my shoulder. Dominic, he said, looking me in the eye, I'll go with you. No one gets to hurt your sister. Not on my watch. His words settled over me like armor. Raymond wasn't just tall, he was commanding. Broad shoulders, a deep voice, and a way of standing that made you feel like everything might just be okay. He used to play football in college, and it showed. But more than that, it was the way he looked at me. Like I mattered. Like Leah mattered. Like he was in this with me, no questions asked. For the first time in weeks, I felt like maybe I had a real shot. The drive back to my hometown took 3 hours. But to me, it felt like a lifetime. I sat in the back seat, my backpack clutched tight to my chest, staring out the window as familiar streets began to roll past. My stomach twisted with every mile. I thought of Leah. I imagined what she might be doing sitting alone in her room, listening to Celia stomp around the house. Crying. Waiting. Hoping I hadn't forgotten her. Raymond drove, eyes locked on the road like he was bracing for war. Sophie sat beside him, her hand reaching back to hold mine. It'll be okay, Dominic, she whispered. We'll bring Leah home. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the worry gnawed at me like rust. What if we were too late? What if he had hurt her again? What if she didn't even believe I was coming? When we finally turned the corner onto our old street, my breath caught in my throat. There it was. The house. Our house. Only it didn't look like a home anymore. The paint on the walls was peeling, windows clouded with grime. Weeds had swallowed the front yard. The porch sagged like it had given up. Under the weak afternoon light, it looked like something out of a nightmare. I stepped out of the car, my heart pounding. This was it. I'll go in first, I said, adjusting the strap of my backpack. You and Uncle Raymond follow, but wait for my signal. I don't want Leah scared. Raymond shook his head firmly. No, he said. We go together. It's safer. I opened my mouth to argue, but then I saw the way he was looking at me. His jaw was tight, his eyes unflinching, like a wall I couldn't move through. That resolute look silenced me. We stepped onto the porch, and I swear my heart was thudding so loud it echoed in my ears. My hand shook slightly as I knocked on the door, trying to keep my voice steady. Leah? It's me. I called, my voice low, urgent. No answer. I knocked harder. Then the door flew open. Celia stood there, her face twisted with disdain, her eyes narrowed to slits. What do you want? She snapped, arms crossed like a snake ready to strike. I didn't respond. I just pushed past her. Leah, I called, my voice echoing through the house. My legs moved before my brain could process. I didn't care about manners or permission. My sister was in that house. Dominic. A small, trembling voice floated from the hallway. I turned and ran. I flung open her bedroom door, and there she was, my Leah, sitting on the edge of her bed, knees pulled to her chest, clutching her doll like a lifeline. Her cheek was red, a harsh slap mark cutting across her soft skin. Her eyes widened the second she saw me, and then she burst into tears. You, she sobbed. I thought you left me. I dropped to my knees in front of her, pulling her into my arms, her small frame trembling. Never, Leah, I whispered, holding her tight. I'm here now. I told you I'd come. She sobbed into my shirt, her fingers digging into my back like she was afraid I'd disappear again. But the moment shattered. What are you doing in my house? Celia shrieked behind us, her voice like broken glass. I turned, standing in front of Leah protectively, as my father stumbled in from the living room. His face was bloated and red, bottle dangling from his hand, eyes bloodshot. You scumsucker, he growled, pointing at me. You dare come back here. Before I could move, Uncle Raymond stepped forward, solid as a wall, blocking his path. James, he said, his voice like low thunder, calm down. We're here to take Leah. Don't make this worse. My father sneered, stumbling slightly, but I saw it. A flicker in his eyes. Not just rage, fear. Take her, he spat. This is my house. I'm her father. That's when Aunt Sophie stepped forward, her face hard as stone, her voice sharper than I'd ever heard it. You beat Eliza, my sister. And now you let your mistress abuse Leah, my niece. You don't deserve to be called a father. You're lying. Celia shrieked. I didn't do anything to that kid. But Leah, still clinging to me, cried out through her tears. She hit me. She hit me when Dad wasn't looking. That was it. That was all I needed. I stood, pulling Leah gently behind me, shielding her with my body. We're leaving, I said, staring straight into my father's eyes. And if you try to stop us, Uncle Raymond won't go easy on you. My father glared, but he didn't move. His jaw clenched, the muscles twitching. I saw his hand tighten around the bottle, but he didn't lift it. He didn't speak. His eyes darted to Raymond's towering frame, and I saw it, the fight draining out of him. Raymond took a single step forward, and my father stepped back. Celia screamed, but we walked out of that house, Leah's small hand in mine, her doll swinging from her other hand like a tether to her childhood. My father stood in the doorway, watching, but he didn't follow. Maybe he knew he couldn't win. We climbed into the car. Leah crawled into my lap in the back seat, wrapping her arms around my neck. I was scared, she whispered between sobs. I thought you wouldn't come back. I kissed her hair, holding her as tightly as I could, my own tears finally spilling, streaming down my cheeks. I'm sorry, Leah. I'll never leave you again, I whispered into her hair as she trembled in my arms. She didn't respond, just buried her face into my shoulder, and slowly, as the car rumbled on, she fell asleep, her small body growing still, her breath soft against my neck. I held her tightly, listening to the rhythm of the tires on the road, letting it calm the storm still spinning inside me. Her face, resting against my chest, looked different now, peaceful, unburdened, as if for the first time in months, she felt safe. Sophie glanced at me through the rearview mirror. Her smile was soft, proud. You did well, Dominic. I nodded, but the words didn't settle in me the way she meant them to. I didn't feel like I had done well. I had left Leah there too long. I had let her suffer in silence while I tried to build myself up. Every day she stayed in that house was another day I had failed. But now she was with me. Safe. And that was what mattered most. When we got back to Sophie's apartment, the warmth of that space wrapped around Leah like a blanket. Sophie ran a bath for her, gently washing the grime and fear from her skin. Raymond warmed leftovers and made her a plate of food, nothing fancy, just soup and toast, but it made Leah smile. It was the first real smile I had seen on her face in months. And in that moment, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. But the shadows didn't vanish just because we escaped the house. My father was still out there. Celia was still out there. And the damage they caused inside both Leah and me still echoed. I couldn't change the past, but I could build something from it. Something stronger. Those first few days after bringing Leah home, I lived in a strange state, caught between relief and restlessness. I watched her play in Aunt Sophie's backyard, humming softly to the doll our mother had sewn from scraps. She danced in circles under the sun, her innocence slowly returning, her laughter uncertain but real. And every time she threw her arms around me, whispering, "Thank you, Dominic," It broke me just a little. Because I knew. I knew I had left her in that house too long. Let her endure too much. Wounds I should have shielded her from. But never again. I made a vow. From now on, no one would ever hurt my sister again. To make that happen, I needed something more than fists. More than bravery. I needed power, the kind that came not from rage, but from knowledge. I needed the law. The idea came to me like a whisper I'd always carried. Something I hadn't let myself hear until now. My mother. She had endured her whole life in silence. She never had a way out, no money, no support, no one to stand for her. I wanted to be that person for someone else. The one my mother never had. The one who could walk into a courtroom and say, "This ends here." One night, as Sophie and I sat in the kitchen, sipping tea, I finally said it out loud. "Aunt Sophie, I want to study law." She looked up from her mug. "Law?" I nodded, the words trembling on my lips. "I want to become a lawyer. I want to help people like Mom. Like Leah. People who don't know how to fight back." Sophie's eyes softened, her lips parting just slightly. And then she reached across the table and took my hand. "Dominic," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "it's a tough path. But I believe you can do it." She smiled, eyes shining now. "You have your mother's heart, strong and never giving up." She took my hand, and for the first time in my life, I felt a kind of support I had never known growing up. It wasn't just love, it was belief. Sophie looked at me like I could actually become something, someone. And in that moment, I started to believe it too. From the living room, Uncle Raymond looked up from the newspaper, raising an eyebrow. "A lawyer, huh?" he said, folding the paper neatly on his lap. "That's good, kid. Real good. But you'll need to study hard. The law isn't a game." He gave me a half smile, but his eyes were serious, grounded. "I've got a friend," he added, rubbing his chin. "A guy I played with back in the day. He's a lawyer downtown now. If you want, I can arrange for you to meet him. See what the profession's really like." I nodded immediately, heart pounding. "Yes, I want that. Please." It was the first step, and I was ready. In the days that followed, I threw myself into my studies with a fire I hadn't known I had. I was done being powerless. I didn't just want to escape the past, I wanted to rewrite what it had made me. My new school wasn't fancy. It didn't have gleaming facilities or expensive resources. But it had something better, teachers who actually cared. One afternoon, after I turned in an essay a full 2 days early, my literature teacher, Miss Miller, called me aside. "Dominic," she said, flipping through my pages. "You're really focused lately." I shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. I want to be a lawyer." "Oh," her face lit up. "That's inspiring. Any reason why?" I hesitated. I wasn't used to sharing. But something about her tone made it easy. "I just want to help people," I said softly. "People who don't have anyone else." She smiled, her eyes kind. "Well, you've got a clear goal, and that's what matters. If you ever need help, Dominic, just ask." From that day forward, Miss Miller became something more than just a teacher. She became a mentor. She started handing me books on legal theory, court rulings, persuasive writing. Every time I handed in a paper, she pushed me further, not out of criticism, but belief. When senior year came, my efforts paid off. I earned the kind of grades I never thought possible, and with them, a chance to apply to a university with a solid pre-law program. When the acceptance letter arrived, Aunt Sophie and Uncle Raymond were so proud they threw a small party, just a cake, a few neighbors, and Leah bouncing with excitement. She handed me a folded piece of paper wrapped in a blue ribbon. "I made this for you," she said, grinning. I opened it, and my throat closed up. It was a drawing of me, standing tall under the old oak tree from our backyard, book in hand, a warm sun shining above me, and our mother beside me, her smile gentle and full of pride. "You'll do it, Dominic," Leah said, her eyes sparkling. "I know you will." I pulled her into my arms, hugging her so tight I could barely breathe. "Thank you, Leah," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I'll do it for you. For Mom." When I got a scholarship to a university a few hours away, I knew I was being given a chance not everyone got. On the morning I left, I hugged Leah as tightly as I had that day at the door. "I'll call every day," I promised. Sophie hugged me with trembling arms, slipping a few folded bills into my hand, even though I knew money was tight. "You're my pride," she said, voice breaking. "Go make something of this, Dominic." Uncle Raymond clapped a heavy hand on my shoulder. "Keep fighting, kid. No matter what." I nodded, words caught in my throat. Then I boarded the bus, my heart heavy with memory and burning with purpose. At university, I studied like a man possessed. I majored in political science, chose law-heavy electives, and worked part-time at the library to cover what the scholarship didn't. Life was anything but easy. Some nights, I stayed up till dawn, eyes burning, caffeine in my veins. I worried about Leah constantly. I was haunted by my mother's voice, her smile, her pain. But whenever I thought about giving up, whenever the world felt too heavy, I looked at Leah's drawing on my desk. The image of my mother under the oak tree, her quiet strength, her broken body, shielding me, never left my mind. It was the fuel behind every sleepless night, every page of legal doctrine I devoured, every hour spent bent over case files and outlines. I couldn't stop. I wouldn't. 4 years later, I walked across the graduation stage with honors. My name was called, my hand shook the dean's, and in that single moment, I knew I was no longer just the boy who survived. I was on the path to becoming someone who could fight back. I called Leah right after the ceremony. She answered on the first ring, her voice bubbling with joy. "You're a lawyer now, Dominic." I laughed, though tears rolled freely down my cheeks. "Not yet, Leah, but I'm almost there." Law school was another kind of battlefield. Every day tested my will and intellect. It wasn't just about studying law, it was about sharpening myself into someone who could wield it. I chose to specialize in family and matrimonial law. The first day I sat in that seminar, I knew I belonged there. The cases we read, stories of fear, control, broken trust, weren't just academic to me. They were memories. My past. My mother. Each file, each testimony, felt like reopening a wound. But I kept reading. I had to. My mother didn't get to have someone fight for her. I would be that person for others. In my third year, I landed an internship at a modest but respected firm in Delaware. It was where I intended to build my future. The firm focused on marriage and divorce disputes cases I felt drawn to with an almost obsessive purpose. Mr. Peterson, the senior attorney, was everything I had hoped a mentor would be. Gruff, brilliant, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He pushed me hard, assigned me the difficult clients, the tangled cases. I learned how to separate rage from reason, to channel my empathy without drowning in it. "You've got potential, Dominic," he told me one late evening as we reviewed briefs. "But don't let your emotions take over. The law isn't always fair, but he pointed to my chest. You can make it fairer." I carried those words with me. One March morning, I was at my desk reviewing case notes when our secretary, Denise, knocked gently. "Dominic," she said, "Mr. Peterson wants to see you. There's a new case. He thinks it's worth your attention." I stood, grabbed my notebook, and made my way to his office, already running through the routine. Intake form, incident summary, any custody disputes. Peterson sat behind his desk, a file open in front of him. His face was serious. "This one's a domestic violence case," he said. "Client is Celia Taylor. She's seeking divorce and an emergency protective order against her husband. Says he's been violent for years, escalated recently." I nodded, flipping open my notebook, already scribbling the basics. But when he slid the file toward me and I read the name listed under respondent, my heart stopped. James Hawthorne. My pen slipped from my fingers and clattered to the floor. My throat tightened. I couldn't breathe. Peterson frowned. "You okay, Dominic?" I bent down slowly to retrieve the pen, buying myself a few seconds. My hand was trembling. I forced myself to meet his eyes. "I'm fine, sir. It's just," I hesitated, voice thin, almost cracking. "I know this man." His eyes sharpened instantly. "Know him how? Do you have a conflict of interest?" I hesitated. Part of me wanted to refuse the case immediately, to run from the past that weighed so heavily on my shoulders. Every cell in my body screamed to turn away, to shield myself from reopening wounds that had barely begun to scar. But then I thought of my mother, of the years she spent caged in fear, of the bruises she covered with long sleeves in the summer, of the night I found her lifeless in a hospital bed. I thought of how she died without justice, without peace. Then I thought of Celia, once the enemy, the woman who mocked my mother's memory, who slapped Leah and screamed at us like we were nothing. I had hated her, truly hated her. But now she was in the same position my mother had been. And no matter who she had been to me in the past, no one deserved to suffer like that. If I walked away, who would fight for her? Who would make my father answer for what he had done, not just to my mother, but to Celia too? I looked Mr. Peterson in the eye, swallowing the lump in my throat. "I know him," I said quietly, "but I can handle it. I want to take this case." Peterson studied me, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if weighing the truth in my words. "All right," he said slowly, "but if you feel overwhelmed at any point, you come to me. This isn't an easy case, Dominic. I need you focused." "I understand," I said, nodding firmly, even though my pulse was thudding in my ears. I took the file from his desk and left the office. At my desk, I opened it carefully, almost as if the papers themselves might burn my hands. Each line of the report was like a needle piercing through time, reopening scars I had forced myself to forget. Celia had accused my father of beating her repeatedly. She claimed he had threatened to kill her if she ever tried to leave him. The case file contained photos of her injuries, blackened eyes, deep bruises on her ribs and back. The sight of them turned my stomach. There were text messages too, vile, menacing words from my father that chilled me to the bone. and a medical report. One particularly brutal incident had put her in the emergency room. Fractured ribs, a concussion. I stared at the photos until my vision blurred. But I wasn't seeing Celia. I was seeing my mother sitting silently at the kitchen table, staring into a cold cup of tea. I was hearing the muffled sobs she tried to hide, the screams I heard through my bedroom walls. I was remembering every time she hugged me beneath the oak tree and told me to be strong. That night, I knew I needed to meet Celia in person. Not to forgive, not to forget, but to understand. Mr. Peterson arranged the meeting and insisted on being present, given the personal history. I agreed. When Celia entered the office, I hardly recognized her. The haughty, cruel woman from my childhood was gone. Her face was thin, her eyes sunken and bloodshot with fear and exhaustion. She wore long sleeves, even in the warmth of spring. She stopped in the doorway when she saw me. "Dominic?" she whispered, her voice small, fragile. Is it really you?" I nodded, my tone level, my body rigid with years of buried emotion. "I'm the legal intern assisting with your case. Please, sit down. Tell me everything." Celia lowered herself into the chair across from me, her hands trembling as she took the glass of water Mr. Peterson offered. She looked like she might shatter. "At first, he just yelled at me," she said, barely audible, her gaze fixed on the floor. "But after Leah and you left, he changed. He drank more." The yelling turned into pushing, then into fists. Every time I tried to leave, he threatened to kill me. Said he'd find me no matter where I ran. I didn't know what to do. I listened, not saying a word, though inside me a storm raged. I remembered her mocking my mother's memory, calling her names. I remembered her ordering Leah to scrub floors. I remembered her standing by while my father threw me out. But now I saw what fear had done to her, how it stripped her of power the way it had stripped my mother, and me, and Leah. She was no longer the villain. She was another victim. And for her, for my mother, I had to see this through. I threw myself into the case. Day and night, I worked. Reading, researching domestic violence laws, gathering evidence, building arguments. Celia's life depended on it. Just as true justice depended on it. My father hired a lawyer, a confident, sharply dressed middle-aged man with slicked back hair and the smirk of someone who thought he could spin the truth into gold. But I knew he didn't have the upper hand this time. The evidence against my father was overwhelming: photos of bruises, threatening text messages, medical reports, and Celia's detailed testimony. He could hire the best talker in the city, and it still wouldn't scrub the blood from his hands. The morning of the trial, I stood in the courtroom, heart pounding like a drum. I had been here before as an intern, seen people take the stand, watched prosecutors and defenders argue. But this was different. This was personal. This was the man who had destroyed my mother and shattered my childhood. This was the man I had once feared more than death itself. When he walked into the courtroom, I barely recognized him. He was thinner than I remembered, his hair grayer, his shoulders a little more hunched. But the eyes, they were the same. Cold, cruel, calculating. He looked at me, and, for a second, a smirk flickered across his lips. "You scum-sucker," he muttered, just loud enough for me to hear as he passed by. I clenched my fists, jaw tightening. I could feel my whole body stiffen, but I forced myself to breathe. I wouldn't let him pull me down into his darkness. Not here. Not now. The trial began. Celia took the stand first. Her hands shook as she raised her right hand, swearing to tell the truth. Her voice trembled at first, but then grew stronger with every sentence. "He would scream at me for hours," she said, staring at the floor. Then he'd hit me. Usually when he was drunk, but not always. She spoke about the threats. How he'd tell her she'd end up like the last one if she ever thought about leaving. I could see some jurors shift uncomfortably in their seats, their expressions grim. One woman shook her head slowly, as if trying to process the horror. But when it was the defense's turn, my father's lawyer stood up, his voice confident, too slick for my taste. "Miss Taylor, isn't it true that you have a temper of your own?" he asked. "And that some of those injuries might have been self-inflicted or perhaps from another incident entirely?" Celia's face twisted. "No," she said, voice cracking. "I never hurt myself. He did this. He did all of this." "Isn't it possible," the lawyer pressed, "that you're exaggerating the story in an attempt to gain leverage in a divorce?" I felt myself rising slightly in my seat, the blood rushing to my head, but Peterson placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "Stay calm, Dominic," he whispered. "We have the evidence. Let it speak." I nodded, grinding my teeth, forcing my breath steady. When it was my turn to speak, I stood before the jury, my legs like iron pillars even though I was trembling inside. I spoke about domestic violence not just as an abstract legal term, but as a force that shatters lives, that creeps into homes and turns love into terror. "Abuse doesn't always leave broken bones," I said. "Sometimes it leaves silence, fear, shame, and scars that no X-ray can detect. I presented the evidence. I laid out the timeline of texts, the medical records, the photos, the witness statements. I didn't say anything about my mother, about Leah, or the boy I once was, hiding in closets to avoid fists. But it was all there in my voice, in the way my hands gripped the podium, in every breath I took. When I returned to my seat, Peterson gave me a nod. His eyes, usually hard and analytical, softened with something close to pride. Then it was my father's turn. He took the stand and, to no surprise, played the victim. "I never meant to hurt her," he said, his voice trembling with carefully placed emotion. "I've made mistakes, sure, but who hasn't? I'm just an ordinary man." He sniffled, wiped his eyes for show. I looked around at the jury, worried someone might buy it. I knew that face. He had used it on my mother 100 times. The tears, the regret, the apologies. All fake. All part of the cycle. The trial lasted 2 days, each moment dragging like a lifetime. I barely slept the night before the verdict. I sat in my apartment, staring at Leah's drawing, whispering into the dark, "Mom, I'm trying. I'm trying to do the right thing." I didn't know if she heard me, but for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. The next morning, we stood as the judge read the verdict. Guilty. My father was sentenced to 6 months in prison, along with mandatory attendance in a rehabilitation program. Celia was granted a protective order and full approval for her divorce. My father didn't say a word. He just sat there, his head bowed. But when he looked up at me, his eyes still burned with hatred. Nothing had changed inside him, but everything had changed inside me. Celia turned to me slowly, her face crumpling as tears began streaming down her face. "Thank you, Dominic," Celia said, her voice choked, eyes brimming with tears. I nodded but said nothing. There was nothing I could say that wouldn't sound hollow. I wasn't here for her, not truly. I didn't do this for her. I did it for my mother, for Leah, for everyone who had suffered like we did. As I stepped out of the courtroom, the crisp afternoon sun met my face. The weight I'd carried for years, resentment, helplessness, fear, felt lighter, but there was no triumph in my chest. Only sadness. A deep, aching kind of sadness that doesn't go away with verdicts or justice. I had held my father accountable. But this wasn't victory. This was consequence. He had destroyed our family, my mother, Leah, me, and now the law had given its judgment. But all I could think about was how many years had already been stolen, how the damage couldn't be undone. Later, I called Leah. "You did it, Dominic," she said, her voice full of awe and pride. "Mom would be so proud of you." I closed my eyes and smiled, though tears silently slid down my cheeks. "I hope so, Leah," I whispered. "I really hope so." That autumn, the streets of Delaware were blanketed in golden leaves, each one like a memory falling slowly to the earth. I stood outside the prison gates, hands deep in my coat pockets, my breath forming small white clouds in the cold air. I wasn't sure why I was there, only that I had to come. Partly to see if he had changed, partly to confront what was left. The guards led me through the heavy gate, past sterile white walls, and into a dull visitation room, metal tables, plastic chairs, everything gray and tired. I sat down behind the thick glass, waiting, my heart calm but tight. When he entered, I barely recognized him. Thinner than before. His eyes, once so sharp and terrifying, looked empty, like someone had flipped a switch and turned out the lights. He sat down across from me, picked up the phone. For a moment, he just stared. "Dominic," he finally said, almost surprised to hear himself say it. I picked up my end of the receiver. "You expecting me to laugh in your face?" He blinked slowly. "No," he said, his voice low. "I came because I want to understand." "Why, Dad? Why did you do those things? To Mom? To me? To Celia?" He looked at me for a moment, then smirked, but not with pride. It was bitter, tired. "You think I'm a monster, don't you?" he said. "Maybe I am. But life hasn't been easy, Dominic. I tried. I failed. The booze, it made me lose control." He looked down at his hands. Those same hands that once shook with rage, now trembling with age and regret. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he murmured. "I don't deserve it." I stared at him, really stared, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel afraid. I didn't even feel angry. I saw a man who had burned everything he touched. A man who had lost everything and still didn't understand why. "I'm not forgiving you," I said evenly. "Not because I don't want to, but because I can't forget what you did to Mom, to Leah, to me." He didn't argue, just nodded, his gaze drifting somewhere I couldn't follow. "But," I added softly, "I hope you'll find a way to make amends, even if it's just for yourself." We sat in silence. Then I stood, placing the receiver gently back on the cradle. He didn't say goodbye. Neither did I. I walked out. And as I stepped back into the world, into the autumn air, into the light, I felt something shift. That final weight, the one buried deep in my chest, finally lifted. I didn't need his forgiveness. I didn't need his confession. I had faced him. not for answers, but to close a painful chapter of my life. Back at the office, life moved forward, but never without meaning. I continued my work long hours, difficult cases, heart-wrenching stories. Women who had bruises they tried to cover. Children who flinched when someone raised their voice. Each file I opened, each name I read, it all pulled at the same thread, the promise I made to my mother. Every time I sat across from a client, especially the women who looked like they hadn't slept in days or the children who gripped their mother's sleeves in silence, I saw glimpses of my past, of Leah, of myself. Each case was a challenge, messy, painful, emotionally draining, but also a chance. A chance to fulfill that vow under the oak tree. A chance to be the voice someone else didn't have. I remembered what Raymond told me once, when I was just beginning. Real strength, Dominic, isn't how hard you hit back. It's how many people you lift up with you. That stayed with me, carved into me. I had learned more than legal codes and courtroom etiquette. Life had taught me lessons I never wanted, but would never forget. I learned that strength isn't just fists or fury, it's in waking up every day when it hurts, in not giving up when every part of you wants to. I learned that justice doesn't come easy. Sometimes it comes late. But when it comes when you help someone walk away from their abuser, when you hear a child say thank you without flinching, it's worth everything. And most importantly, I learned that real love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet presence, a hot meal, a call at midnight, a whispered "I believe in you." It was Aunt Sophie staying up late to help me fill out applications. Uncle Raymond driving 3 hours in silence just to stand behind me. Leah drawing me pictures of oak trees and smiling again. They were my flame through the darkest nights. If I could speak to anyone who's hearing this who feels trapped, lost, broken, I'd say this. Don't let your pain define you. Let it build you. Let it be the fire that forges your purpose. Use it. For yourself. For others. And if you see someone else in the dark, reach for them. You don't know what that one act might mean. Find a spark, however small. A dream. A memory. A voice. A promise. Hold on. That could be your beginning. As for me, I don't know what the future holds. I don't know what battles lie ahead. But I know this. I will keep fighting. For my mother. For Leah. For people I've never met, but who need someone to fight for them. And under the oak tree in my heart, where the wind still whispers and my mother still smiles, I know she sees me. I know she's proud. I won't stop. Ever. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.